Good morning. My name's Bill Scrimshire. I am not Ruth Robarge. She probably knew it was going to be cold. Anyway, I'll give you a nice warm welcome to All Souls Church, and that's the only warm thing you're going to get. Our boiler is out, in case you're wondering why the heat doesn't start. It's not going to start, but by next week we should have it back. So all we can do is hang in there and think what it would be like to be homeless or something really miserable on a cold, wintry day. And also, may I wish you a Happy New Year, because the New Year is about to arrive. One thing we like to do is welcome our guests, because in this part of the country, most of us were not born UUs. We're converted from other religions or no religion. And so we appreciate guests. That's often how we get to be members. It certainly was true of me. Do we have any guests this morning that would like to introduce themselves, or members who would like to introduce a guest that they brought or have met? Any guests today? Please stand, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from and why you're here, and we hope you'll stay. Any guests? I often can't see the back because even on a cloudy day, there's a glare. We don't even have one guest. I'm not earning my money, I guess. Well, you're all welcome anyway. Thank you for coming, and we have a good service, so relax and don't think about the cold.
Again, good morning. There are sometimes folks who would like to see us do church the olden days way, and that would mean bringing hot bricks with us. Welcome to this final Sunday morning of the year 2019. Christmas is over, Kwanzaa is underway, the longest night has come and gone, a new year is on the horizon. A season of endings and beginnings, according to the calendar. But even in nature, winter itself is not an altogether idle season, as we sometimes think. Rather, the trees, the plants, the animals are all preparing for new growth in various ways. Our culture often teaches us only to see the active phases of life when productivity is apparent and progress can be measured with the eyes. Only when we are moving, working, blooming, fruiting, are we doing anything important, or so we are told. But the earth is wiser than we are. It knows that the dreaming and the waiting also matter. It knows that nothing precious comes to birth without a time of darkness and inner growth. It may begin with something as distant as a glimpse of silver starlight or one small candle flame, a wish, a hope, a longing, a stirring in the heart. That is how creativity often enters the world, without fanfare, quietly, in the dark moments when it seems that nothing is happening. During this season of deepening, we invite you to honor the intentions that are brooding even now within you. The hopes for yourself, for others, or for the earth. The new directions that your life could take. The creative endeavor that through you might bring light into the world. And we invite you to record that aspiration on a New Year's star and add it to the shining branches out in the lobby, anytime between now and the second Sunday of the new year. To name a hope is to strengthen it, give it substance. And then at our last Yulebach of the season in January, everyone will take a different star home with them and hold that intention for our fellow member all through this new year. To hold another's hope in our hearts is to strengthen the bonds that connect us to each other. And knowing that someone else is cherishing what is quietly growing in you makes everything you wish for more possible and more real. As we kindle once again this chalice flame of our faith, may it remind us on the darkest days that the winter time does not celebrate the summer sun in all its splendor, but rather the rebirth of the light and the turning toward new beginnings.
Good morning. My name is Sierra, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
We killed it. Thank you, Sierra. Now, before we rise to speak as usual the words of our community's covenant promise, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence to honor the short lives of the 7 children who have died in the custody of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement during the past 18 months. They were fleeing with their families from violent oppression in Central and South America, hoping to find asylum here in the United States. Marie Juarez died on May 10th, 2019. She was just a year old. Wilmer Joshu Ramirez Vasquez died on May 14th, 2019. He was 2 years old. Jacqueline Rosemary Kale Macken died on December 8th, 2018. She was 7 years old. Felipe Gomez Alonso died on December 24th, 2018. He was 8 years old. Darlene Cristobal Cordova Valle died on September 30th, 2018. She was 10 years old. Carlos Gregorio Hernandez Vasquez died on May 20th, 2019, at the age of 16. So was Juan de Leon Gutierrez, who died on April 30th, 2019, at 16 years old. That children die is one of the cruelest tragedies of nature. That they die needlessly of want and violence is a moral failure of all humanity. That they die of bureaucratic inattention in our hands and on our watch is a shame to this nation and a reproach to our policies. May the memory of these little ones move our collective hearts from the vision of higher walls to greater compassion, larger hospitality, and an implacable demand for more humane justice. Also this morning, we hold in our hearts our Jewish neighbors everywhere, particularly those of the Orthodox community in Monsey, New York, who were attacked by an anti-Jewish assailant while at a Hanukkah observance yesterday. 5 were wounded, 2 of whom remain in critical condition. May the spirit of rededication, which is the essence of Hanukkah, invite us to rededicate our own community to its enduring values of interfaith friendship, collaboration, and understanding, and to human dignity and religious freedom everywhere. Margaret? One of the problems with it being cold, right? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Now will you rise as you are able and speak once more the words of our covenant. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to seek together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And let's remain standing for our opening song.
The morning hangs a signal upon the mountain crest, while all the sleeping valleys in silent darkness rest. From peak to peak it flashes, it laughs along the sky, till glory of the sunlight on all the land shall lie. Above the generations the lonely prophets rise, while truth flares as the day star within their glowing eyes. And other eyes beholding are kindled from that flame, and dawn becomes the morning when prophets love proclaim. The soul has lifted moments above the drift of days, when life's great meaning breaketh in sunrise on our ways. Behold the radiant token of faith above all fear. Night shall release its splendor, that morning shall appear.
The season of Yuletide has always been a celebration of light, both ancient and modern. One of the most recent reflections of this celebration is Kwanzaa, a holiday created in the 1960s, especially for Black people in the United States. It is intended to honor the heritage of Africa and to lift up values which are of particular importance to the Black community in its struggle for equality and justice. The word Kwanzaa comes from a Swahili expression for the first fruits of the harvest, And the holiday borrows elements from many traditions, including feasting, gift-giving, candle lighting, and storytelling. It is observed for 7 days, from December 26th to January 1st, and it includes creating a special area in the home for the woven mat, the fruits, the ears of corn, the unity cup, and the 7 candles. One of these candles is lighted each day, representing each of the 7 principles celebrated at Kwanzaa. Part of the special feast that is shared with family and friends at Kwanzaa is called the libation to the ancestors. This is an opportunity to recall and honor the memory of our parents, grandparents, and forebears, as well as those prophets and teachers who have contributed to our understanding of what it means to be human. The holiday of Kwanzaa was created in 1966 in the radical Black communities of Southern California by Professor Manuel Ron Karenga in the wake of the assassination of Malcolm X and the Watts riots. It was a response to the sense, as one Black woman commentator put it, that people of color are all clamoring for something ancient within our souls that is still virgin from white touch. Dr. Karenga is now quite an old man, and his legacy within the history of 20th century American racial struggle is much disputed. He was convicted and spent 4 years in prison for kidnapping and torturing 2 women who were part of the radical community. And many others who worked with him during that time believed that he also functioned as an agent of the US government for counterintelligence and was responsible for the murder of several movement activists. Dr. Karenga claims, and his supporters believe, that these accusations are all part of a continuing effort by the government to frame and discredit him. The volatility, secrecy, and corruption of those years make each proposition potentially credible, although they remain mutually incompatible. Nevertheless, as a writer and advocate Shante Griffin suggests, Kwanzaa is bigger than Maulana Karenga. It always has been. Kwanzaa is an ideal, a bright, shining star, she says. If Karenga taught us anything, it's not to unify and celebrate, for we already knew to do that. Rather, it's that we must continuously offer each other our best selves for the sake of our children, our children's children, and their children. His actions remind us that we cannot permit one of us to do to any of us what whiteness has already done to all of us. We are worthy of more. The libation to the ancestors.
For Mother Earth, the garden and cradle of human life. For Father Time, the unfolding history of human endeavor. For the long line of men and women who struggled that we might see this day. For the ancestors who gave us their many heritages. For the elders here, from whom we have so much to learn. For our young people, who are the symbol of tomorrow. For the hopes and values that guide us in all we do, and for those who hold us all accountable to those principles, for all the forces that create and uphold life, for the strength to continue in our struggle until all people everywhere are free.
Another part of the Kwanzaa tradition is lighting the 7 candles that stand for the 7 principles celebrated by this holiday. I invite you to join me in the responses on the screen as we light the Mishuma Saba, the 7 lights. The first and central candle of Kwanzaa stands for unity, for there can be no community without unity. The second candle of Kwanzaa represents freedom, for no community can survive unless people are free.
Therefore, as we rejoice in the light, let us treasure freedom for ourselves and all people.
The third candle of Kwanzaa means responsibility, for no community can prosper unless people work together. Therefore, as we rejoice in the light, let us live and work in harmony with all citizens of the earth. The fourth candle of Kwanzaa stands for economic resources, for no community can endure without satisfying basic human needs. Therefore, as we rejoice in the light, let me see in prosperity that leaves no one poor. The fifth candle of Kwanzaa represents purpose, for no community can function without shared aspirations. Therefore, as we rejoice in the light, let us work together toward a common dream. The sixth candle of Kwanzaa means creativity, for no community can grow unless it can find new ways to solve problems and to make beauty. Therefore, as we rejoice in the light, let us share the gifts of our creativity. The seventh, okay. We're missing a piece there. All right, well, I'm going to tell you what to say then. The seventh and last candle of Kwanzaa symbolizes faith, for no community can live without hope for the future. Therefore, as we rejoice in the light, let us believe that together we can become the beloved community that is meant to be. And now our children are invited to depart for their classes with song.
Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessing of your nights and days. Truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to follow where the human spirit leads.
Good morning. My name's Scott England. I'm a member of this congregation and a member of your board, and it's my honor today to introduce the offering. As we know, 4 Sundays a month, or 3 or 4 Sundays, depending on how many Sundays there are, we share our offering with organizations in the community. On the 4th or 5th Sunday, the offering is used towards the general budget. This being the last Sunday of the year, usually people would think, oh, great, it's one last chance to get in a tax deduction. But with the new tax laws and everything, a lot of charitable organizations were worried that, oh, we're not going to see as many donations because people are just going to rely on that general deduction. But, for me, it was never really about the tax deduction. My support for the organizations I supported. It was because those organizations supported the values I had or did work that I thought was important but couldn't do myself for various reasons. So regardless of what your general deduction will be in the upcoming tax year, we ask that you please reach out and support this community that supports your values and helps do the work that you think is important. For checks, please designate on the memo line general budget. If you're donating electronically, you can use the choice for contribution, donations, or general budget. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Will you join me in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
It was not until industrialization created the conditions for leisure time, when family size fell and childhood became venerated as a special time of life, that pretend play became highly valued by the majority of people. In agrarian societies, children are not particularly encouraged to play, and when they do, they tend to imitate adult activities, farming, cooking, childcare. In urban middle-class families, adults actively encourage pretend play. They often believe that play is important for the child's cognitive development, and they promote fantasy play, play that does not reenact the everyday world, but alters it. They tell stories about dragons and princesses and talking dogs. They participate in pretend play directly, making a stuffed animal talk or waging war with space aliens. They turn bedtime stories into a ritual, encouraging children to explain what a character on the page is doing or thinking at different points in the story. By early childhood, these children are highly active in pretend play and capable of elaborating complex, imaginative, functional scenarios with others. What is true of the play of children is also true, broadly speaking, of the play of adults. Of course, societies across time and space create stories in myth, drama, and ritual. Narratives are everywhere, both solemn in sacred texts and comical and commonplace like folklore. But narratives that are explicitly fictional, explicitly not true, that adults take up and cultivate as private realities, may be a more modern phenomenon. Movies and television, which we know to be make-believe, can surround us with great vividness. The very juxtaposition of these explicitly fictional worlds and our repeated practice of shifting between them must affect the modern sentiment that we can choose what to believe, that we can imagine can be more important than the world we perceive to be real. Television, the virtual reality of the internet, and the all-encompassing world of music we can create around us are techniques that enhance the experience of absorption, of being caught up in fantasy and distracted from an outer world. We are also increasingly isolated and socially disconnected. Together, these social changes have facilitated the modern faith practices that build an intensely intimate relationship with God. As we switch our DVD players on and off, we practice living in multiple realities. And it seems quite likely that the closely held sense of a personal relationship with God, always there, always listening, always responsive, and always with you, diminishes whatever isolation there is in modern social life. The route to this God is complex and subtle, at once childlike and sophisticated, drawing on skills and practices found throughout human history, but in a form specific to this time and space. It is a process through which the loneliest of conscious creatures can come to experience themselves in a world awash with love.
On repelling fewer people, Multiculturalism and Unitarian Universalism by Reverend Anthony David Maker. In his 2009 Berry Street lecture to the UU Ministers Association, Professor Paul Razor asks, is our brand of religious liberalism fatally linked to a demographic that's fading? Projections indicate that in 2042, white people will compose only 50.8% of the population. Will we still be a faith community that is 90% white, as we are today, and as we have been for the past 10 years, even after all the proactive anti-racism, multiculturalism work by leaders in our denomination? Unitarian Universalism, as it is practiced in most, if not all, of our congregations, is an ethnic religion with cultural norms. Echoing this, UUA President Peter Morales says, one of our problems is we have a faith with enormous appeal, but we need to stop packaging it in Yankee culture. From comments shared by Rosemary Bray McNatt, following on the heels of Paul Razor's lecture, this culture is a matter of aesthetic and lifestyle preferences. We don't own TVs, don't like gospel and pop music, and definitely don't like rap. We are unapologetic nature lovers, eat locally, say no to shopping at Walmart, listen to NPR, love Garrison Keillor, and read ahead in the hymnal to see if we agree with the words we're about to sing. But, says Rosemary, how does this allow us to encounter people whose experience of church is different? What is their entry point into our congregations? Our congregational culture proves to be a barrier to many people who would otherwise love to be a part of us because they love what we love, the promise of personal and social transformation through free religion.
Taking a leaf from David Letterman, and with thanks to the Reverend Sidney Lang of Dublin, Ireland, who got tired of listening to his parishioners' excuses for not coming to church. Here is this morning's top 10 list of reasons why I don't wash. Number 10. People who wash are self-righteous hypocrites. They think they're cleaner than everyone else. Number 9. I do wash on special occasions, like Christmas and Easter. Number 8, and particularly apt for this morning, the bathroom is never warm enough. Number 7, I used to wash, but it got boring, so I stopped. Number 6, I need to sleep in the morning. There isn't enough time to wash. Number 5, I'm still young. When I'm older and dirtier, I might start washing. Number 4, well, there are so many different types of soap. I could never decide which one was for me. Number 3, my parents insisted that I wash when I was a child. So to show my independent thinking, I'm going to do exactly the opposite of what they wanted. Number 2, none of my friends ever wash. And the number 1 reason why I don't wash, the people who make soap are only after your money.
So the premise is simple enough. Jim Mitchell, hey Jim, glad you're here, challenged us to acknowledge that this community, of which he himself is a part, may be less diverse and less accepting, actually, than we would like it to be, and than we usually tell ourselves that we are. It is a proposition worth exploring, not only because Jim made the winning bid 5 years ago at the service auction back in 2014, but also because the foundation of all spiritual growth and maturity is self-knowledge and self-awareness. At the same time, as Joseph Campbell and others have shown us, myths can be powerful forces Indeed, they may be a necessary component of human spiritual life. And our myths about ourselves here at All Souls are no exception. This morning, I would invite us to consider 3 myths about All Souls. And these are, in fact, myths about Unitarian Universalism generally. We are not unique. To which I think Jim means to call our attention. This is my interpretation of his challenge. You can ask him later if I got it right. They are the myths of acceptance, of diversity, and of community. In my view, they interlock with each other and are mutually sustaining, so that much that may be said about one will be true for the other 2 as well. The first, which is perhaps the closest to our conscious awareness, the one that may be easiest for us to see, is the myth of acceptance. It shows up in the second item of the UUA principles and purposes, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth within our congregations. I think it is no accident that these 2 concepts, acceptance of one another and spiritual growth, are presented together. The best way to learn to be compassionate and understanding toward others is to become aware of our own limitations and how much growing we need to do ourselves. Nobody is perfect, and we are all in this together. And the people who are the most encouraging cheerleaders of our growth are not those who say, "Here's how good I am, be like me," but rather those who say, "This is what I struggle with. What can I learn from you?" The way to become a community is to confront the deepest challenges we all face as human beings together, which is what religious institutions are for. But the truth about Unitarian Universalism, to which this congregation is no exception, is that its historical tendency has been to protect ourselves against the challenges of genuine mutual encounter and growth on a spiritual level by retreating into an intellectual argument about the logic of atheism and turning it into a litmus test for who belongs in our special little circle. This allows both the no personal God humanists and the I haven't ruled out the possibility that there's something bigger than me theists to walk around feeling like endangered minorities and persecuted victims, which is the exact opposite of either growth or acceptance. Part of this conundrum turns on the expectation of feeling safe and what constitutes safety. It is easy for me to say, on the one hand, because I was born into this tradition and raised in it and by it, and I am totally confident that nothing anyone can say about me or anything I can think can make me not belong here. And yet, at the same time, this also makes me a minority in Unitarian Universalism, where some 85% or more of our members come from a different faith, were not raised in this community, so that the escape from orthodoxy is the paradigm religious journey which I do not share. Wherefore, if I care to do so, I can appropriate the same logic as embattled theists and embattled humanists, and maintain, not without some painful personal anecdotal evidence, that my story doesn't count, and no one is listening to me and those like me, and that this community is not a safe place to ask the kind of questions that are urgent for my inner life. What this claim accomplishes is to let me off the hook of actually exploring those urgent questions with others who might challenge my thinking or call my bluff or confront me with new ideas. Or more alarmingly, they might tell me about their own pain and touch my heart, or see my vulnerability and love me anyway. The truth is that none of us is actually safe. Life is a risky proposition, and the world is a chancy place. Our culture deals in threats to our self-esteem in order to motivate us to buy stuff. We all lose the people and things we cherish. We are all getting old, and eventually will die. Who should feel safe? The answer is to grow up and give up. Give up on feeling safe because you are not and never will be, and neither is anyone else. And give up on feeling special because you already are, just like everybody else. Our genuine spiritual journey, the one that actually gets somewhere as opposed to going round and round in little ego-centered circles, begins when we accept our own mortality, finitude, and imperfection, recognizing that this is the condition we share with every other human being on the planet, regardless of our theology or their theology. So yes, your wounds are real wounds, and your suffering deserves the compassion of others. So are their wounds real and deserving of your compassion. Let's also be clear that your privilege and my privilege is real too, and often invisible to us and harmful to others. None of us gets to be innocent, and none of us gets to be safe, regardless of humanist or theist or any other category that you care to name. So if we wanted to make acceptance more of a reality and less of a myth here at All Souls, the people who don't identify as atheists would need to speak up and make the effort to describe what their experience leads them to believe, and not retreat into a sullen silence in which they can blame the aggressive humanists and not have to do any work. And the humanists would have to give up on having Unitarian Universalism as their private clubhouse, where they congratulate each other on how clever they are, while anyone who doesn't perform the secret atheist handshake can be condescended to and told they don't belong. If we really mean what we say every week about dwelling together in peace, it starts here, dwelling in peace and acceptance and mutual curiosity and shared compassion with people who differ from you theologically, not just tolerating them from across the room, but genuinely accepting them, embracing them, learning from them, caring about them, being vulnerable with them. If we can't do that much here, what business do we have going around calling for global peace? And speaking of differences, that brings us to our second myth at All Souls, diversity. In reality, we are, like many other UU congregations, an ethnic church. We may not want to be, but we are. We have a very identifiable socioeconomic, educational, cultural, and increasingly generational profile, concisely summarized by Rosemary Bray McNatt in the reading a moment ago. If you want to learn more about the specifics of this culture, read David Brooks' 2001 portrait of Bobos in Paradise, and find the culture of Unitarian Universalism described on every page. Bourgeois bohemians, he calls us, abbreviated as Bobos. We aspire to bohemian values, but live quietly bourgeois lifestyles. We identify politically with the oppressed and resent government intrusion into our individual moral decisions. But we operate from a position of economic and intellectual privilege that we resist acknowledging. We tend to think of privilege as something possessed by Donald Sterling or Donald Trump and the Bush and Kardashian families, whereas we, with our student debts, our mortgages, and our kids' orthodontia, are barely getting by. Former UUA President Peter Morales calls this Yankee culture, and he probably sees it better than many of us since he doesn't come from it. It is based on thrift, industry, intellect, individual rights, and personal reticence. One does not make a display of one's achievements, one's wealth, or one's feelings. To the extent that you are part of it, you don't see it. It is invisible to you, and its expectations are simply the way that right-thinking, decent people behave. Every culture is like this, of course. It assumes that its own ways of sorting out the human condition are, by definition, superior ways. And for Yankee bobos, like Unitarian Universalists, this means dealing with religion as a phenomenon appropriately experienced from the neck up only. We are easily alarmed by the messiness of bodies, passions, needs, ecstasies, money, sex, or suffering. And yet, a religion devoid of these powerful energies may appear strangely lifeless and may actually fail to meet many people from outside that Puritan heritage at a place where they can connect to its offer of meaning and hope. As Anthony McCarr experienced in his experiment with a different form of worship at the Pathways congregation, traditional Unitarian Universalist culture has a rather restricted liturgical vocabulary. Now, it's not that UUs don't enjoy religious tourism. We like to go hear upbeat, percussion-driven music in other churches and witness exotic Hindu ceremonies or Sufi dancing and appreciate Buddhist chanting. But don't ask us to come home and pay for a 5-piece band every week at our church, or move our bodies in worship, or learn how to deepen into a chant of our own. I submit that this is the diversity we need to worry about. Race and age and class and all the other categories that we fret so much over would fall into place, I suspect, if we could learn to hear our own cultural idiom the way it sounds to those who do not share it. And what makes this increasingly urgent is that our traditional culture, like any immigrant heritage, is dying out. Our own children, for the most part, do not share it. Which means that our real task is to figure out what constitutes our religion, other than 19th century New England intellectualism filtered through mid-20th century Bobo lifestyle preferences, so that we can get some help translating that into a 21st century vocabulary and cadence. Be assured, be absolutely certain that many of you and I will be disconcerted and perhaps even dismayed by that translation. Rejoice and be glad. That means that this precious faith has a life that transcends our personalities and the peculiarities of our historical era. In order to make the myth of diversity into a reality, we must teach ourselves to see beyond our own cultural comfort, for we cannot welcome people who are different without opening up to unfamiliar habits, ideas, and forms of expression. If we can learn to recognize cultural discomfort when we feel it and greet it every time it arises as an ally in the effort to give our church a future, not only will we make that future more possible, but we will also genuinely practice the value of diversity. And we will each grow toward a greater spiritual maturity ourselves. The final myth, and the most difficult, is the myth of community. As I said before, all three of these, acceptance, diversity, and community, are interrelated. Authentic community requires that we connect with one another on a more than intellectual level, because we know that human beings are social animals with open limbic systems who regulate each other's physiological and emotional well-being in relationship. Neither our bodies nor our minds are designed to thrive in isolation. Community is more than an aesthetic pleasure. It is a nutritional necessity as much as vitamins or protein. But the kind of community that keeps us healthy is not created by people amusing themselves together, or at least not only that. Rather, it arises when people engage with each other in struggles that matter, in working together toward a goal that none of them could achieve alone, in overcoming a difficult obstacle, or managing a crisis, or creating something of value. The process of building a home and raising children and sustaining a family is one of the paradigms of that experience. It is certainly reasonable to hope that in the course of that endeavor, there will be moments of deep joy and many other moments of simple enjoyment. And yet, I think we all understand that such a profound and significant task as family never unfolds without also bringing conflict and disappointments and struggles and needing enormous amounts of patience and forgiveness as the years pass. And that is why, if the participants can endure and stay engaged with each other, it becomes a source of such great satisfaction. If it were easy, there would not be nearly as much to be gained. So the myth is that if we can get together and have a good time, we are building community. But I don't think so. Only when we let each other get close enough that we breathe together, so that if one of us falters, the others keep the rhythm going. Only if, as the proverbial blessing puts it, we have such understanding that when one of us weeps, the others taste salt. Is it really the community that a religious covenant is meant to build? So we have these myths about ourselves, and then we have the realities that Jim Mitchell and I want us all to pay attention to. But listen carefully now. Myths are not lies. Myths are humanity's oldest form of suspended disbelief. They summon up that same ability that you access whenever you sit down at the theater or in the movies, or when you turn on the TV or curl up with a murder mystery or a romance novel. For that moment, for those few hours, you set aside what you know to be reality and willingly enter into the world of fiction, even though you know in some part of your brain that Norman Bates doesn't really stab Janet Leigh in the shower. Doesn't that scene still make your heart pound? Suspended disbelief is one form of limbic connection, which is why the intensity of a horror movie often makes for a more romantic date than a mushy chick flick. Myths are a form of suspended disbelief that helps us to learn and teach and understand what the world is about and what we are trying to create together. There's nothing wrong with having myths. You just have to know what they are for. So we come here every week, and for a couple of hours, we suspend our disbelief about acceptance and diversity and community, because those are the deepest and dearest wishes of our hearts, because it nourishes the human spirit to imagine what the world would be like if they were so. And that is what human beings do. It's the pretend play of adulthood, which is just as significant and essential now as it was when we were toddlers. And I believe to the very core of my being that myths like ours are the only thing that can challenge the other dangerous, seductive myths of dominance and greed and exclusive privilege with their potential to destroy us all. Bad religion, with its superstition and credulity, its bullying, loyalty, and blind obedience and self-righteous cruelty, bad religion drives out no religion. People who think they have no religion are the first to succumb to the lure of the newly self-proclaimed prophet and their aggrandizing revelations. The only preventative is good religion, the kind that asks us to confront mortality and human finitude honestly, and to take up the myths of acceptance and diversity and community. Not because we have fully realized them or ever could, but because that is the kind of world we want to live in and the kind of people we are striving to become. So let's rise and sing together.
We are not our own, earth forms us, human leaves on nature's growing vine, fruit of many generations, seeds of life divine. We are not alone, earth names us, past and present, peoples near and far, family and friends and strangers, show us who we are. Therefore let us make thanksgiving, and with justice willing and aware, give to earth and all things living liturgies of care. Let us be a house of welcome, living stone upholding living stone, gladly showing all our neighbors we are not our own.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth or the warmth of community or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. Therefore, in the words of John Murray and John Wesley, go out into the highways and byways, give the people something of your vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it to bring more light and understanding into the hearts and minds of people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach kindness and everlasting love. If necessary, use words.
May a song of peace be yours. May a song of hope be mine. May a song of